please, don't stay home in November. If you love our country and love your children as much as I know that you do, stand and speak and vote your conscience. Vote for candidates up and down the ticket who you trust to defend our freedom and to be faithful to the Constitution.
And that is Texas Senator Ted Cruz basically hijacking night 3 of the RNC. What appeared to be a pending endorsement of Donald Trump wound up being a rallying cry from the Dump Trump movement. The RNC called that speech classless. Another man who's made waves by skipping the convention, Ohio Governor John Kasich. We also sat down with him this week as he explained his decision. Governor, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Let's get right to it. You're the Republican governor of a state that is hosting the Republican National Convention, and you're not going to it. Why not?
Well, I'm here in Cleveland taking care of things from the standpoint of security, meeting with delegations, just like I'm going to do. You know, I made a speech in New York called Two Paths. I said that we need to unify, not divide. We need to engage in the world, not isolate. And, you know, I'm just not comfortable with where we are. And I don't want anybody to think I'm self-righteous or riding on a high horse. We just have different visions and different views of what this party ought to be. And I just feel that unless he changes his views, they're not consistent with mine. And what I said in the campaign really matters to me deeply.
Some in the party have called you disloyal for not holding up the pledge to support the Republican nominee. The nominee himself has called you names this week. What would he need to do to change to earn your support?
No more than what happened to Saul on the road to Damascus when he got knocked off his donkey and became later Paul and wrote 2/3 of the New Testament. Look, I don't believe we should isolate. I'm not anti-trade. I'm not anti-immigrant. And I'm not anti the post-Cold War institutions. So these things would have to change for me to become. I've never seen a candidate that has secured our nomination where we're just so far apart. Always felt a connection, and I think it's fair to say that Trump's positions have fundamentally distorted what the face of the Republican Party is now. And I kind of always liked the face of the Republican Party. Not that we didn't need to be more inclusive, but again, these positions in regard to immigrants, deporting people, or religious tests, or anti-trade, I just don't think it's good for the country.
For the information that we have before us right now, do you think the country would be better off if Hillary Clinton were to be president?
No, I think it's a really unbelievable choice. Hillary has become, I've been waiting for her Sister Souljah moment, like her husband stood up, and it looks like everything that Bernie says she does. And no, I'm not for Hillary under any set of circumstances, but I am for Kelly Ayotte. I'm for a Republican Senate and a Republican House, and I'm going to spend a lot of my time trying to do that. And I'm looking forward to coming back to New Hampshire. And look, people always say we would really like to have some principled leaders. Okay, I agree with that. Sometimes people who are leaders have to stake out things on their own. And then when people pound them, they have to be willing to stand. That's kind of the moment of truth. So I'd love to see a change in things. I'd love to be able to be involved in the presidential. But right now, I don't see it. And if the fact is that if I don't matter, then I don't know what they're so concerned about attacking me for. I mean, I find it kind of amusing, to tell you the truth.
On Sunday, when the world was arriving in Cleveland and everybody was talking about national unity and party unity coming together, you were in Cincinnati and you were talking with the NAACP. Why did you make that decision? What was your takeaway in all of this? And
well, I'm the governor of Ohio, and we have a lot of issues all over our state, and we have issues in our urban areas. And we have done many things in this state to make sure that members of the minority community know that they have a place here and they have an opportunity. So whether it's criminal justice reform, which is not locking a nonviolent felon up next to a murderer or rapist, giving people a second chance when they pay their time, reforming welfare so we don't punish work, and creating a collaborative between police and community. I mean, when you look at what's happening in Cleveland, I wish all the people in New Hampshire could be here. It is astounding how this has gone. Now, we can't predict what's going to happen in the next 2 days because there are anarchists, people who come here to create violence. But what I've learned through all of this is that if the public doesn't support them, it's hard for them to get traction. And we've seen this in Cleveland. We've seen a sense of optimism and hope here, and I don't think people want to go backwards on that. So going to the NAACP convention is an effort by me to say, look, having conservative principles, being concerned about job creation, there's also a lot of things we can do to make sure that everybody feels as they have a stake in this. So I was glad to go. I think it was a little bit shocking. I don't know that a Republican has ever opened the NAACP convention with the first major talk, but I was glad to do it, and it was very comfortable for me.
Let's talk about New Hampshire. Looks like their place in the process, our place in the process, I should say, is safe for 2020. What was your biggest takeaway from having spent so much time there, being a part of the primary process, finishing second, and obviously probably made a lot of memories and friends too?
I love New Hampshire. You know, I had the best time. I've always liked it. You know, before I got there in this campaign, when I had a short-circuited one the last time, I had nothing but good memories. And this time, I made so many friends, and I can't wait to go back. It's just a great place. People are friendly, they're engaged. I mean, what can I say? I had so much good, and I miss it. And I'm really looking forward to going back. I really am. To see all the folks again. Spent so much time there, but it was nothing but good.
But the place in the process, a lot of people say, you know what, it's too small.
Oh, no, it's great. I mean, I think what happened this time is I did exceedingly well, but the media was so focused on controversy and Trump that we never really got the bump, but that'll change. I think New Hampshire is such a great place where people provide the screen through which the people of the country can look. I think this was an unusual time, but no one expected me to beat everybody other than Trump. It just, you know, we just didn't get the bump we thought we'd get, but no sour grapes, no whining about it, just a fact. But I think it needs to stay there. I mean, absolutely needs to be the first primary in the country. People there do a heck of a good job.
You mentioned Senator Kelly Ayotte. She's in a tough Senate race with the Democratic governor of New Hampshire. You said you can't wait to go back. Are you planning on?
Oh yeah, I'm going to help her, do whatever I can to help her, help the Republican Party. I believe very strongly in Kelly. Look, the fact that the race is close is that's nothing unusual about that. You have a governor with big name ID. You have Kelly with big name ID. These are two women that are, you know, trying to claim a United States Senate seat. It's expected to be close, but I think she will prevail. And she's a real force in the United States Senate. And I'm looking forward to being at her side if she wants me. I mean, I'll go up and campaign for or against her, whatever will help her.
All right, let's hypothesize, if you would indulge me for just a moment. Sure. Let's say in 4 years the opportunity is there once again. Think you'll still have the fire in the belly to give this another shot?
Well, you know, a lot of people didn't think I had fire in the belly this time. You know, fire in the belly is the real question is, in your mind, commitment to your country. I have no idea what I'll be doing in 4 years. I don't know what I'm going to be doing in the next 4 hours. But what you do is you want to make sure you can be a good voice to help your country. That's really the key to it. As to whether I would do it again, I don't know. You don't close the door on anything, but it's not like I'm plotting or planning. You know, we're not even through this year. To be thinking that way would be, I think, first of all, it would be stupid, and secondly, wouldn't be appropriate.
Governor, best of luck to you, no matter what you decide to do in 4 hours or 4 years.
Yeah, thank you. All right, Josh. God bless.